Welcome to the third week of Beetlegust. And if you're new to my channel, Beetlegust means Beetlejuice themed videos all August long. In the first video, I worked on the structure of the house. In the second video, I worked on the stairs and the bar that go on the first floor. And today is all about furniture and accessories. And I know I've said this before, but I have to admit I'm really starting to love Delia's style. I think she was ahead of her time. And she really wasn't appreciated for it. So I just want her to know, I'll throw it out into the universe here. Delia, I appreciate your style. The first thing I want to start with is a painting that isn't really front and center. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. I thought it looked incredibly fascinating. I love painting in miniature, so that is why I'm so excited to make this one. Here is the painting that I'm referring to. It's right behind the red bar, and this seems to be the best shot of it, even though it's at night. I pulled it into Photoshop and played with the perspective a bit, and the reason I want to do this is because I'm going to trace it to try and get the proportions as close to it as possible. My guess is this is a painting that Delia would have supposedly painted. I think it's really fun, and the more I look at it, I realize I think it's supposed to be her and Charles holding hands, maybe in front of their new property. I shrunk down this piece to the size that I want to create in miniature, and then created a stencil that I can cut out on my laser. So hopefully I can get pretty close to the original. Here's how the stencil came out, but before I can use it, I need to prepare my painting surface. When I create miniature paintings, I really like to paint on cardstock. I feel like its thickness is pretty close to canvas in real life scale, and then I prepare the surface with some gesso. This will give it some marks that look like canvas, and it just prepares the surface to take the paint a little bit better. So once that's dry, I can move forward with the painting. I am going to be using green, red, black, white, and gray. There is another part of the movie that makes it look like it's actually yellow in the painting and not green, but at this point I was using green and I kind of like how it turned out, so I'm just going to leave it. I painted the background first by blending some gray, white, and black to get a painterly effect, and then I can start working with my stencil. All this is really going to do is help me get the shape of the people correct. I added the same size grid onto this paper so I could line it up with the lines on my cardstock paper. That way I knew I was getting it centered, and then I just lightly stenciled some white paint through the openings so I knew where these marks were supposed to be. And because I don't want them to look like cloud people in the end, once I was done with the stencil, I took some more white paint and did some brush strokes over the areas that I had created. I also used the stencil whenever I was adding some of the other painterly type swipes that are seen in the painting. I tried to match as closely as I could what I saw in my reference, which does end up looking kind of interesting. I guess you could say that about most things in this house. It does look very interesting, but I really did end up liking this painting. I liked the original, and I had a lot of fun recreating it. The red is a little in your face, and it does look a little murderous at times, but I do think the green paint is a good counterpart, and I liked how it came together in the end. Now, I was thinking that it looked a little bit too bright, and so I went over it with a wash of black paint, and the best way I found to do this was to put the wash over the white areas and then dab it back up with a paper towel so it wasn't too dark. I think it helped the painting look like it was more worked over than it actually was in just this couple hours it took me to work on it, so it helped in the end. And I couldn't help but change it up a little bit, add my own personal touch. I added the covered bridge up at the top of these two marks at the top of the painting. To me, it just looked like a road, and I thought, how perfect would it be if we had the red covered bridge at the top of this painting, and it was like Delia and Charles standing in front of it, or perhaps the two ghosts that are living within the house. So this is the final product of the painting process. Now I want to make it look like it was painted on a canvas. Originally thought I was going to frame it, but when I looked at the reference, it is definitely on a canvas. So my plan is to wrap this cardstock around a piece of MDF that is cut to size. To protect my paintwork, I am going to put it face down on a piece of wax paper, and then I can glue the MDF directly to the back. I'm trying to keep it as flat as possible so I don't have any warps in my painting. I'm laying down some 1, 2, 3 blocks on it so it does dry flat for a little while before I try to wrap the canvas. I'm cutting out the corners so that it's a little bit easier to handle wrapping it around, and then I'm going to add some glue onto the edge. I am again going to use my wax paper during this part because I can press it onto my work surface so I get a very sharp edge on the edge of my cardstock fold. Once that's dry, I can remove the excess cardstock and do this to each one of my sides. Now it looks as though it's a wrapped canvas which has been painted on all the sides, and I'm pretty happy with the results. So let's put this into the project. Before we do that, I will hold it up one more time to my reference on my computer screen that I've been looking back and forth between, and I do think it will work out well. I do like the addition of the covered bridge. I really hope someone doesn't comment, "Hey, this is a really famous painting that you just messed up." I'm gluing this in permanently. I can't really think of a reason not to or anything else I would be putting on this wall, so I'm okay with it being permanent. It did try to slip down the wall a couple times, so I had to keep my eye on it. Speaking of keeping my eye on things, I did notice someone spying on the installation process a little bit earlier. Usually he is way over here in the glass case, so let's just put him back. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Maybe I said his name a little too much recently. This is just for safety purposes. He needs to be over here. Now you may have noticed in the same screenshot that I found the painting, there is quite a large plant in the corner of the room. I'm also going to make a second plant just like this one to go underneath the stairs because currently I don't know what to put under there. For this, I'm taking inspiration from the channel Little Gretchen's Workshop. She has a fantastic video on making plants from masking tape and floral wire. I will link her video and her channel down below. She has a ton of other really cool tutorials. Very straightforward and easily explained, so make sure to check her out. In Gretchen's video, she used masking tape and floral wire, but I just happen to have some frog tape, which is already green, which I think will work well. It didn't work well for protecting my walls from my last painting process, but hopefully it will work well here. I am laying down my masking tape long ways because I really want to make these large leaves in the background, and I'm going to sandwich my wire in between each piece of tape. This took a little bit of patience because the tape did want to curl up on itself, but I used some tools to keep it weighed down while I was working on it. Then I can take my scissors and craft these really large leaves, trying to get the shape that I see in the movie. Once that's done, I can cut at the sides because it does look like the leaves are separated in a few areas. I'm making really tiny pizza wedge shapes in the leaves so that you can see the gaps in them. If I had just cut and left it there, you might not be able to see the gaps as well. Then I'm taking an embossing tool and putting my leaf on top of a soft surface so I can push down into the tape, and I'm just making lines that are in the same direction as the little pieces that I cut out. This is going to help give me the texture of the leaf that I'm looking for. The green color of the frog tape is making this look so much like a leaf, just way faster than I thought it would, but I do plan to do a bit of painting. The wire is going to help hold it in its shape, however I want the plant to look, so I'm already very excited about this plant. I'm going to make 5 leaves for each plant, so I went ahead and made their masking tape pieces in different sizes. Then I can cut them all to the shape that I want, a pretty similar shape to each other, and then do all the process I just previously showed you with the cutting and the embossing. I have this paint that I marked Mod Podge Mix, and so I'm guessing at some point I mixed some Mod Podge into this green paint, and this is what I'm going to use to give a little bit of color variation on my green leaves. I'm dabbing the green paint all down the center spine of the leaf. I'm not quite sure what to call the middle part of the leaf. And then I'm going to feather the paint out towards the edges. It needs to be darker in the center and lighter towards the outside. I did 2 layers of this because sometimes mixing Mod Podge and paint makes it a little bit more transparent. Then I'm going to take some yellow paint and go up that center spine of the leaf again, and this is just something that I see in the movie reference, so that is why I am replicating it. I don't even really know the name of this plant, I'm just trying to get as close as I can. Once that was finished, I felt like it was just a little bit too bright. I think it looks good, but it was pretty bright. So I am doing a watered down mixture of some green and brown paint, and I am going to put that all over the leaf. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and get some of the areas where it really pulled off. And this is going to give me more of a natural look where parts of the leaf are a little bit more dull and parts of it are brighter. I did this on all the pieces, and towards the end I just realized I could just tap it onto my paint palette and get most of the wash off of the leaf. While those were drying, I could go ahead and focus on the plant pots that I needed to stick them in. I had this piece of recycling in my recycle bin, and I was really staring at these little cube pieces and thought that they would work really well. I'm going to have to cut off 2 pieces per plant pot because then they make this really cool bumpy little cube, which I can totally see Delia liking. So I'm cutting 2 of these, trying to match them up as well as possible, and then I'm going to cut a hole where my plant is going to come out of the top. And then this piece was kind of a wonky shape, so I thought, hey, Delia would just run with it, and let's make another wonky shape for the plant to come out of. I cut the opening, and then these pieces were ready to be glued together. I'm gluing them with some hot glue at first, and this is just going to be an initial way to stick them together so that I know that it's fitting correctly. And then I'm going to start filling it full of beads. This is going to give it some weight so that my plants aren't falling over. And I did want to fill it with rocks, but I could not find any rocks. I have a bag of pony beads that is probably going to last me the rest of my life, so I figured this would be one good way to use them. I just kept adding glue and then a layer of beads and then more glue and then another layer of beads until they were close to the top. I'm smoothing out the side of the plant pots with some lightweight spackling, and I don't need it to be too smooth because I really like the texture of this recycling, so I'm just trying to smooth out the seams. And then I realized the bottom was not flat at all, and I did not want these falling over, so I'm going to glue some of these wood circles I have just lying around to the bottom, and this is going to ensure they aren't going to tip over. So now I have my 2 pots ready to be painted, and of course I'm going for a nice glossy black. I don't think these are going to be seen very well, but I do think Delia would like their look. Now I can add in my leaves since they've dried. I'm continuing this process with hot glue, but before I can glue it in place, I'm going to curl up the wire and set the leaf in so that I know I like its position. I'm also trying to keep in mind what I want the front of a planter to be while I'm doing this. I'm adding in the leaves from largest to smallest because I do want the smaller leaves to be in front, and then when I position the plant, I know that I'm going to have the taller leaves in the back, and hopefully you'll be able to see most of them. Once the hot glue was dry, I needed to add in my soil. This is really just going to be on the very top part of the plant, and this is going to be a mixture of coffee grounds and tacky glue. Most of the time I use Elmer's glue, but I used tacky glue this time, and it made this coffee blob, which worked out pretty well because I could just position it in the center of my plant and use a stick to press it into place. I really don't need this to sink down into the pony beads, I just want it to stay at the top, so this texture worked really well. If I had any remaining tacky glue I could see on top, I just added a little sprinkle of coffee. Now I'm adding some Mod Podge to the leaves. They do have a shiny finish. This is matte Mod Podge because I don't want it to be too shiny and look fake, so this is just a little bit of shine. I'm making my brush strokes go with the grain of the leaf, and I'm doing this on the front and the back. And then while I can touch the leaf, but I know it's not completely dry, I want to go ahead and shape my plant how I want it to look. I'm trying to do this before the Mod Podge completely sets. I'm placing the larger leaves up straight, and then I'm just going to adjust the other leaves around it. In the movie, the plant is pretty vertical. There's not a lot sticking out the sides, so I'm trying to replicate that. Here are my two finished plants. I'm going to let them dry completely, and then we can put them into the project. I may not always keep this first one underneath the stairs, but at the moment I don't really have anything else to put there, so I thought this would be a good place for a plant. It brings some of the green color over into this area, and the nice thing about the wire is I can bend it, so it didn't quite fit, so I had bent down the very tallest leaf so that it would fit underneath. And then the other plant is going in this corner. This is in the movie, this is where it's sitting. I didn't realize, hold on a second. I didn't realize the plant would take up so much space. Pardon me while I take care of this again for a second time. Now that that giant plant is finished, it's time to focus on the chair that's in front of it. I made the matching couch quite a while ago in a live stream. I will link that one down below as well if you want to see how that went. This one is going to have some similar properties as in cow print, but I'm going to start with an already made chair and I'm going to give it a makeover so it looks closer to the one in the movie. So let's get started. I purchased this little chair at the Dallas Miniature Showcase for $8, and I already knew that I was going to make it over. It doesn't really have an artist signature. It looks like there might have been a tag on it at one point, but I never really liked the upholstery, so I always knew I was going to finish it. I did not realize I was going to refinish it for the Beetlejuice house, but when I was using it as a placeholder, it was just the perfect size. I have this cow material that I've used on a previous piece of furniture, so I'm hoping I have enough to use on this chair, but I also have this black fabric if I need something extra. The first thing I need to do is remove the existing cushion, and it just kind of came out like a slice of cake. Anyone want some cake? And then I can remove the back cushion, which was a little bit more difficult to get to. But thankfully they did come out pretty easy and I didn't have to use any harsh glue removal methods. I'm also going to try and remove the blue fabric from the cushions so I can reuse these inserts. This was a little bit more difficult. The glue here was pretty strong. As you can see, there's still a little bit of blue, but I will be covering that up. Before I can add the cow material, I do need to reupholster the bottom cushion in white first, because as you can see, the cow is see-through, and actually this could be called Stormy material, honestly. It looks just like Stormy, but I need to upholster this. I'm just going to wrap it like a little gift, trying not to burn my fingers with the hot glue, so I have a white surface to work on instead of the yellow and teal. So I'm making sure as I go along that everything still fits in the chair. And while I'm talking about the chair, I'm going to go ahead and sand this and start the painting process. I am going to make this again the glossy black, just like I did the planter. It does seem to fit in with Delia's style. Once that was dry, I could go ahead and glue in the back cushion. Again, you're not really going to see the back cushion, but it fills in this gap back here because I'm going to create a new back cushion and I need something back there for it to glue against. So I just upholstered that in some black and glued it in place. It won't be seen in the final product. And then I retested that my bottom cushion worked, and it did. So now I can move on to the cow material. I'm going to try and be very conservative because I do not want to make any more of this. It is going to be a pretty simple upholstery method, and this stuff has become very stiff, so it's not like I can do anything very fancy with it anyway. I'm just kind of wrapping the cushions, gluing it in place, and then snipping off the excess. I'm going to be cutting very close to the sides of the cushion because I'm going to try and put an exact size piece on the side. You can't really see the sides, so I could probably get away with not doing it, but I am going to cover it up. I can't just leave it like that, even though I think I might be able to get away with it. The back of the chair in the movie comes up past the frame of the chair, so I'm going to extend it with a piece of foam board, and I'm covering that with some quilt batting. I've done this many times in other upholstery videos, so I'm just going to kind of zoom through it. But I will put a link to one of my main upholstery videos that people seem to like in the description box below if you do want more information. Now I'm covering the back piece with some more of that cowhide looking material. It's kind of like a little matchbook, honestly, how it's coming together. And then again, cutting very close to the edge so that I have an even gluing surface on either side. The reason for this is I'm just going to take some more of material and glue it flat onto the side. I think this is going to be the easiest way to do this. So I'm taking some of my scraps, and thankfully I have just enough to cover the sides of both of these cushions. I'm adding glue to the side and to the edge of the previously applied material, and I'm pressing it down, holding it in place until the glue takes hold. Then with some detail scissors, I can very carefully go around the sides, clipping off the excess. This is going to be a very tight fit, but it does look very clean and sleek. And then I'm just going to cover the edges with some more tacky glue. It's not going to be a problem that the glue is on the surface because everything in this material is covered with glue, so it's just going to blend in. And the glue is helping me ensure that it's not going to come apart. Now that everything is covered, I can add the base cushion onto the chair and the back cushion onto the back. I just kind of had to guess where the glue was going to touch, so I think it's going to touch on the very bottom of the back cushion and the back edge of the chair. So I had to add that glue in place before I even started this process because it is a tight fit and I was afraid if I got it in there, I'd never get it back out. So here is the finished chair. It's quite a change from its original look, but I do think Delia would like it. So we can go ahead and put it into the Beetlejuice dollhouse. And as I mentioned earlier, the plant does take up quite a bit of space, so it's a little hard to push the chair back in the corner, but I think it'll still work.
Am I overstepped my bounds? Just tell me, come on.
Oh my gosh. Perhaps you are in need of a much more solid door. There is a rug in the background of the scene that I'm trying to create this month, and I missed it before when I was doing the dining room, but there is a bright red rug underneath the dining room table. I found this remnant of red fabric, and I'm going to try and turn it into that rug. I'm first doing a test with a small piece of red felt and the red fabric to see how the glue works, because you just never know how glue is going to work with fabric, especially something that is kind of fuzzy. You don't know if it will kind of mat it down or what it's going to do. So this is my trial run. I'm trying not to squish the glue down too much because I don't want it to go through the fabric. Once it's dry, I can use some detail scissors to cut around the edge and get as close to the felt as possible. The felt and the glue is going to make sure that it doesn't fray anymore, and anything that is going to fray, I can go ahead and remove it with my fingers, and we shouldn't have any more fraying in the future. The glue looks good, so let's go ahead and do the same thing, but with a bigger piece. The most important part with this gluing process is the glue around the edges. That is what is going to help fray check the edges of the red fuzzy fabric. So I'm making sure to get that all correct, and then everything in the center is just going to help keep the two pieces together. I used my vacuum to go around and get as much of the fluff, or the pieces that are going to come off anyway, off of the edges, and I think it's a good fit for our dining room table. I wanted to make one more rug for the living room area, and I'm going for this piece of, I'm not quite sure what it is. It looks like leather, but it's this fake material, and it is going to be a perfect weird rug for Delia's living room. As you can see, I tried a few different weird shapes on this piece of brown felt. I'm going to glue this on the back of the leather-like material, even though it's not going to have any fraying problems. And the reason for this is it gives it a little bit more thickness. I think it makes it look a little bit more like a high-end rug type thing. And I'm not quite sure this is the rug I'm going to stick with, but it's something to kind of be a placeholder until I figure out what I really want to do with that space. And you can see the Fabrifix glue through the leather a little bit. This is just while it's drying. It does look a little bit better down the line. Now I can add the rugs into the space. So the red rug is going into the dining room, and the dark black, or the brownish rug, it is really brown, but I think it's dark enough to go with the other black accessories. It is going into the living room where the chairs are at. And I really wouldn't consider myself that much of a modern designer or modern artist, but I do feel like this is looking fairly good with all the shapes and bright colors. And now every single room on the floor has something bright red in it, which I think brings it all together. And of course, hold on a second.
Learn to throw your voice, fool your friends, fun and party.
We're gonna take a little walk to the other end of the studio. No worries here. Nothing to see. We're just going to put him down here in this drawer. Maybe it'll hold him. And no, I do not trust you with the rotary cutter. I had this idea, and you'll have to let me know what you think. In one of the final scenes in the movie, this part of the floor is broken and a sandworm eats Beetlejuice, and there's the hole to the netherworld. So I was thinking I could possibly create that hole here and light it up from the bottom. So I, again, don't know if I'm going to keep this rug, but I might be able to do it where it's convertible to where sometimes there can be the hole, and then sometimes there can be a rug over it concealing it, and this can be a regular living room. So let me know what you think of that idea. For now, I'm just going to continue making this as if it's a complete living room, but it would be a really fun reference to the movie if I could cut out this bottom area. And since I'm sticking with the regular living room idea for now, I am going to have to create a coffee table for Delia. I'm making a couple things with my laser cutter. This one is going to be cut out of acrylic plastic, so it's going to hopefully look like a glass table. And then this piece over here, this is kind of a weird reference in the movie. It looks like a man with a hat in the corner. I am just going to basically make a black cardboard cutout and put this in the corner of the room as just kind of a funny thing that people who have really studied the movie might recognize and just think, hey, that's funny. I basically just traced the head shape so it would be very close to the one in the movie, and then I added a generic body form, and I'm going to create this little foot piece that will slot together so he can stand up in the corner of the dollhouse. I cut this out of black mat board, so I don't have to do any painting. It's literally just going to be cut it out and glue it together. I cut 2 of each piece so it would be extra sturdy, and this is where I'm gluing the 2 pieces together. I want it to last for a while. And the marks on my hands are from the ash on the edge of the mat board. Sometimes it just depends on the material. The laser cutter will do that. Finally, once the pieces that were glued together are dried, I can add in the little stand piece, and he is complete. I don't often use acrylic in my laser cutter, so I always get nervous whenever I have to cut it. I barely caught it on camera because it's such a small piece, and it only cut through one of the protective layers, so you can see the other piece is still in there. So one side does have a protective plastic layer and one side doesn't. For the legs, I'm going to be using these pieces that I previously used for the ladders when I worked on the kitchen. I think this will be a good drawback to that material. I'm using a rubber band to hold them together, and then I'm going to use UV resin to glue them in place. I put some of the resin in a silicone little bowl, and I'm using a toothpick so I can be very precise on where the resin is going. I'm using a UV light to freeze it in place, and this is going to connect the leg of my coffee table to the underside of the coffee table. And I made sure several times this is the side that doesn't have the protective layer on it anymore, otherwise it wouldn't actually be sticking to the acrylic. I added a bit more UV resin to the cross section between the wood legs. I froze that in place as well with my UV light, and then turned everything over to make sure that it was good and cured. Now I could remove the rubber band because everything had been glued down with the resin, and I could cut the legs to the correct length. This is not going to have the ability to stand up as it is, so I'm going to use one of those wood circles that I used previously for the planters, and I'm just going to glue this down with the resin like I did for the other part of the legs, and this is going to help hold up the table, and I think it still gives it that sleek modern look that I'm going for. I really hope Delia would like this one if she were to see it in person. It is a little bit hard to see what her coffee table actually looks like. I think the glass top is correct, but I'm not sure about any of the rest of it. And I had a hard time getting this plastic covering off. I will do that a little bit later. I also wanted to create something to go on the coffee table. You can see in the movie that Delia has a globe thing similar to the one that's trying to escape off of my table. It is on the mantle, but the mantle I created is the one that has morphed because of Beetlejuice's interactions with everything that's going on. So I've decided to make something similar but of my own creation that will sit on the table. I used small pebbles and some glue to put it in this tray, and I think it'll still go with the theme. I also had this other little rock that I could put next to it. I'm going to take a quick break from making things to see what I have in my collection that might work as accessories for this room. Because if I already have it, there's no point in creating it. So let's take a look. I'm looking for items to go on the bar and around the rest of the room. Thankfully, I still had this collection of alcoholic items that I used in the kitchen. I also found this little succulent plant that I thought could work, and of course this big jug of wine. I think Delia would love that. And oh, I found this little thing of cheese balls, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny to hide this behind the bar, or maybe even under Delia's bed at some point. So unsophisticated. I had a few other plants that I thought would really work in this house, so I grabbed those, and a little tray to put some of our alcoholic items onto before putting them onto the bar. These little clear bottles came with their own labels, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know what alcohol goes with what label, so I might have totally got it wrong, but I started gluing them down to the tray, and I really like how it's starting to look. Who knows what drinks they were able to make from all of this? Maybe it doesn't make any sense to someone who knows what they're doing behind a bar, but I do not. And then I was able to move on to updating the plants. Really, I just was painting the pots black to go with the pots that I made for the larger plants. And this was pretty easy because the two that I had to update were just bare wood, so they took the paint really easily. And finally, with much satisfaction, I was able to get the final layer of film off of this plastic acrylic, and I think it's looking pretty good. So let's put everything into the project. We have the coffee table that's going to go in between the two chairs, and of course all the items that are going to go onto the coffee table. I added the little succulent plant here as well. And then the items that need to go onto the bar. I don't know why, but this is like my favorite part of the whole thing, is the bar having these little delicate items on top. And then I need to add my cutout. He's going to go over here in the corner, just kind of lurking and being mysterious. And I feel like the ladders I made for the kitchen are going to work much better in this area of the house. Here's a final look at everything I was able to accomplish in this video. You may notice that there are baseboards in some parts of the house and in some parts they are missing. That's because I have not glued the stairs in yet. It's going to be so much easier to work on the drapes underneath the stairs without the stairs being in permanently, and I can't put the baseboards in until the stairs are glued in.
Nice model!
I will most likely not be filming the rest of the baseboard process, but if you do want to see how I do my baseboards, I do go over it in the kitchen building video, and I show how I put the baseboards in there, which is a very similar thing. So I am super excited. We are going to be filling this house up with so many miniatures in the next video. We're going to put in the kitchen and the dining room, and it's just going to be full. And by the end of it, the Maitlands will be standing right here. That's all I have for you today in this episode of Beetlegust. I hope you enjoyed it. There's still some things that are left to do, like the drapes, the lighting, the light fixtures, but that is all going to have to be in another month because I am really determined to get the Maitlands done before the end of August. Also, I need Mr. Technology to order the lights for basically the entire first floor. That should be a really fun episode. But for this month, my goal, if you remember, is to recreate this scene.
How long do you suppose we were waiting there?
And I definitely need the Maitlands for that. So in next week's video, I will be making them and setting out all of the miniatures that I have made for the first floor. It'll be the first time it's all put together all at the same time. I did have a request last week for me to remind you where the removable panels are, so I will do that real quick in case you were wondering. One removable panel is this fireplace right here, so you can see into the living room pretty easily. Another removable panel is this area in the back of the dining room that has the blue glass. And the third panel is over here in the kitchen. And when I get to the second floor, I plan to have a removable panel in this wall so that you can see down into the living room pretty easy. That's the plan. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Oh, and we will update this. We're gonna update it so much. There's so much still left to do. You get so much done, yet there's still so much left. Also, can you find Beetlejuice in this last scene? You can go back to my outro if you want to see it bigger, but he is somewhere in this scene. He keeps bugging me. I need to stop saying his name so much. Instead of his name project, I should call it Delia's house. The Delia dollhouse. That would get me in a lot less trouble.